great opportunity for me as I get to lead the next session. So I'll moderate the next session and go over a few points here. I'm excited about this session. This highlights partners that we'd love to be engaged with and hope to be engaged with over the next year, boosting our impact through strategic collaborations. There'll be 3 presentations, but there are actually 4 speakers. The first speaker is Joe Cornelius, who now works with Gates Ag 1. Prior to that, he was a director at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Global Growth and Opportunity. Prior to that, he was the director of the Advanced Research Project Agency that focuses on new developments linking agriculture innovation to energy applications. And that was with the Department of Energy. And prior to that, Joe has extensive experience in industry with groups like Bayer and Monsanto. And he's been really involved with developing new products and taking new technologies to marketplace. The next 2 presenters will work together from USAID, Meredith Soule and Jessica Bagdonis. Meredith is the director of the Inclusive Development Division at USAID, and she's an agriculture economist by training. And another thing, she has really extensive international experience working in Burkina Faso, Mexico, and Kenya. And she's been with USAID since 2001. And she's in an area, as I noted, that we're really looking forward to strengthening our program as we grow over the years. Jessica Bagdonis also has 20 years of experience and is the leader of the human and institutional capacity development work in the Bureau of Resilience and Food Security. Prior to that, she was director of program quality and impact at USAID. Unlike everybody else on this panel, has extensive international experience and worked in more than 30 countries in areas like agriculture, workforce development, and education. And lastly, Joe Devries, who many of you know. It's great to have you here, Joe. Joe leads a group called Seed Systems Group now. But Joe's reputation has been known for the past 30 years, working in country on the ground, leading programs from as far as Mozambique through sub-Saharan Africa. His background is plant breeding and genetics, and he was the leader in the Alliance for a Green Revolution program, acronym PASS, Program for African Seed Systems. He's done an incredible job, and that program's model for other efforts as we build our seed systems capability through the ILCI. And one of Joe's goals is really to make sure that every farmer in Africa has access to high quality seed, and it's more than just the science. And Joe will highlight that today. So what we'll do for this section is go into 3 successive presentations, and then following that, we'll have approximately 15 minutes for questions. Thanks.
Thank you for the invitation to participate in the 2020 ILCI Annual Conference sponsored by USAID and Feed the Future. My name is Joe Cornelius from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, newest subsidiary, Gates Agricultural Innovations. To provide some context on who we are, the foundation has created 2 subsidiaries with the purpose of accelerating translational product development. The Gates Medical Research Institute was created several years ago in order to accelerate technologies emerging from foundation investments in global health. Subsequently, Gates Agricultural Innovations was launched this technologies emerging from the foundation's investment in agricultural development. Bill and Melinda Gates Agricultural Innovation is a long name, so we refer to it as Gates Ag 1. Gates Ag 1 is a wholly owned subsidiary. It is a nonprofit organization dedicated to translational development of cutting-edge crop science innovations. Identical to the foundation, Gates Ag 1 is focused on delivering impact for the benefit of smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. As everyone on this call understands, agriculture is at the intersection of multiple planetary challenges: climate change, population growth, environmental sustainability, and economic parity. Our vision is agriculture that improves the world. Agriculture has the scale and capability to be a major contributor to solving many of these challenges. Today, we are witnessing a convergence of science and technology that is unprecedented and a catalyst for breakthrough innovations in physical and biological sciences. However, many of these breakthrough discoveries are not reaching the people who need them the most. At the foundation, we have observed a real gap in the advancement of public and private sector innovation being translated into smallholder farmer impact. There is a valley of death between discovery and impact, and it is our mission to bridge the gap. We aspire to build a world-class gene-to-seed product development ecosystem that translates cutting-edge discoveries into affordable and accessible products. Building a network of collaboration partners from universities, institutes, private sector companies, small and large, NGOs, and government agencies. We will endeavor to de-risk and advance the development of breakthrough crop science essential to smallholder farmers. So as you can see, Gates Ag 1 is already aligned with ILCI and Feed the Future. We all believe agriculture has the potential to be a part of the solution. Agriculture has the power, but that power is dependent on equitable access to the tools and products needed to increase productivity and food security. These challenges can only be successfully addressed by strong partnerships and a commitment to translation. The Innovation Labs for Crop Improvement and the National Agricultural Research Institutes are advancing plant breeding tools, technologies, and methods that are aligned with Gates Ag 1. We look forward to working with all of you on our journey to impact. Thank you.
Morning. I'm very happy to be here with all of you today, and I'm grateful for the invitation to talk about inclusive development. I'm Meredith Soule, the Division Chief for Inclusive Development in the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security. I know ILCI is working on these issues, and you have some great partners already, such as GREAT, Cultural Practice, and others. And I'm happy to tell you about our group at USAID in RFS, and that we are also here to support you. Next slide. So the Inclusive Development Division was created in the transformation from BFS to RFS, where our new vision now is a resilient and prosperous world for all, where no one is left behind. The division sits in the RFS Program Office, which helps to ensure the thoughtful incorporation of gender, youth, vulnerable, and marginalized groups in the design and implementation of all RFS and related mission programming through the sharing of best practices and other activities. We also adopt an expansive view of inclusion that includes and promotes local capacity development and digital development as cross-cutting themes that are integral to advance inclusive development. Because we are located in the program office, this means that our division provides support to all of the 4 RFS centers, Ag-led growth, resilience, nutrition, and WASH, and their partners, as well as to all field missions. Next slide. For Ag-led growth, resilience, and nutrition, our work is based on the GFSS results framework, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The goal is to sustainably reduce global hunger, malnutrition, and poverty, but that can't be achieved without the foundations of the cross-cutting themes circled in red, including gender equality and female empowerment, youth governance, improved organizational and systems performance, and digital. Next slide. So how do we define inclusive development in USAID? We say it's the concept that every person, regardless of identity, is instrumental in the transformation of their own societies. And we promote an inclusive, non-discriminatory, and integrated development approach. Non-discrimination is necessary but insufficient, and it requires proactive efforts to address societal barriers. And we call these proactive efforts inclusive development. We also have two key principles, which are do no harm and do nothing without them. Do nothing about them without them. This next slide, please, is on the global context for inclusion, where I include a few the high-level statistics about why we do this. We're also sharing this presentation with you so that you can look at this more in depth later on, as well as the resources that you'll see on the next slide, where we have our key policies and technical guidance. There are links here for each of these areas to the agency policy, as well as technical guidance that we have on gender equality, youth, digital and local capacity development, as well as on Indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, and LGBTI. So I hope that you'll refer to that slide often when you want to know more about the agency's policy and guidance. The next slide, I want to talk a little bit about data and why it matters. Consultations and data help us understand complex and sometimes hidden development challenges, and it enables us to analyze the whole picture, to conduct analysis on the root causes, identify the problems, and monitor the symptoms or outcomes. It's crucial for effective decision-making because what we do is influenced by what we measure. So within our activities that we fund, we do want to make sure that everyone is collecting indicator data that's both sex and age disaggregated when it's at the individual level, and that you're also setting targets for things like the number of people trained or the number of people using new technologies. We'd also like to ask you to be taking a look at the capacity building indicator and using that. CLB9 is the percent of USG assisted organizations with improved performance. On the right here, here's some of the information we've collected through data is that 52% of research outputs have been developed with gender considerations. And we'd really like to see that getting much closer to 100% in alignment with our agency requirements and also those of the WE Act, which was passed a couple of years ago, the Women's Economic Empowerment and Entrepreneurship Act. Next slide. So we're here to help. Again, I'm the chief of the Inclusive Development Division. Listed here are other advisors, and in particular, I'm going to pass this presentation over right now to Jessica Bagdonis, who's going to talk about some things related to local capacity development and the Innovation Lab Community of Practice. Next slide. Over to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm happy to have this opportunity to share more about the Innovation Lab Cross-Cutting Themes Community of Practice. Next slide, please. This community of practice is being launched in response to a recommendation from an external review that was conducted last year to better understand the breadth of the capacity development and gender integration activities across the innovation labs. In that external review, 5 recommendations were made, one of which was the recommendation to establish a community of practice that would provide a forum for knowledge sharing and learning on cross-cutting themes. To that end, this community is envisioned as a forum that facilitates shared learning, empowers cross-cutting theme champions with the support that they need from others, contributes to the reduction of transaction costs by working together across the labs on these issues, and to explore the roles and capacities of actors, including women and youth, in multi-stakeholder research networks. Next slide. The COP also is envisioned as a forum that works on multiple levels, both at what we might call a horizontal level, or primarily to facilitate more effective collaboration on these issues across innovation labs and USAID, and at what we might call a vertical level, to support collaboration across multiple actors in the countries whose journey to self-reliance we're supporting. Next slide, please. So a little bit about where we are in the process of launching the community of practice. First, I would like to emphasize that this is all a bit of a meta learning exercise. While we're supporting the sharing of learning on the integration of cross-cutting themes across innovation labs, USAID, and other partners, we also are piloting this community of practice to learn if it's a valued and effective modality to support such collaboration. In that sense, we're slightly building as we go, in collaboration with you and based on your needs and interest. Participation in the community is voluntary and open to any individual receiving funding or affiliated with activities of an innovation lab, whether that's in the United States or in our partner countries. GKI, or the Global Knowledge Initiative, was brought on in May of this year and has a period of performance lasting 30 months, which takes us through the end of August 2022. Since their start, GKI has conducted consultations with over 40 stakeholders representing 17 different innovation labs. They've also conducted several small group workshops with Innovation Lab cross-cutting champions to begin identifying plans and activities for the community, including the development of a charter. Later this year, they also will host their first knowledge sharing and learning workshop events, and invitations to these upcoming events will soon be shared with all innovation labs. Finally, they also are working on developing some network analysis approaches in collaboration with the iReach team of the Sustainable Intensification Lab to launch, hopefully in January, some activities that will inform learning about capacity development at the network level. Next slide, please. As I mentioned on the previous slide, one of the initial activities on which the community has been working is the development of a community charter. The charter tentatively proposes a structure that includes a steering committee and affinity groups for the different cross-cutting themes. At present, affinity groups have been proposed to address gender and capacity development, but if there is additional interest, other groups could also be added, like for gender, for youth or digital development. GKI is also developing operational support for knowledge management and sharing, and one of the most exciting components that I think they're developing is a set of country dashboards, which will visually illustrate which innovation labs are working with which partners in which countries. Next slide, please. And here's a static example of one of the dashboards showing innovation lab activities with university partners in Ghana. The previous slide has an embedded link to a fuller set of the dashboards that you can explore on your own. GKI hopes to build out these dashboards to show engagement, not just with universities, but with other types of organizations, like national agricultural research institutes, governmental research agencies, other private sector actors, etc. We believe that the development of these dashboards is a critical step in understanding the capacities of the research and innovation networks in the countries that we're supporting, as well as understanding the important role that the innovation labs play in those networks. Next slide, please. So by now, I'm hoping that you're wondering how you might get involved in the cross-cutting COP. There are two immediate steps that you can take. The first is to take a short survey linked here about your interest and to provide commentary on the community charter. The second activity that you can do right now is to reach out to Kat, short for Catherine, at GKI to let her know your interests, and she'll make sure that you're on the mailing list. I also am always very happy to discuss further, as well as are my other colleagues in the Inclusive Development Division. So please do reach out directly to us at any time. Thank you for letting us speak with you today. We look forward to engaging more as your activities progress.
Hi, I'm Joe Devries. I'm a plant breeder and president of Seed Systems Group. And today I'd like to share with you some ideas and experiences from our work in the field of seed systems development in Africa, which we believe can be useful to ILCI and other crop breeding initiatives as a downstream service for farmer adoption of improved varieties at scale. First, though, I think it's important to show the evidence for the effectiveness of breeding and seed supply at farmer level. And the graphs in the top row of this slide show an increase in total seed supply in Uganda and Ethiopia that took place during the period of about 2008 up to 2017. And the data in the bottom section of the slide show increases for an important crop, maize, in both countries, which are really quite impressive and which coincided with the increase in the supply of seed. If we look around the continent and look at the data, we can see that similar trends can be detected for other crops in other countries, which have also been assisted to improve their seed supply. For example, bean yields in Rwanda, cowpea yields in Mali, although there's a little bit of more noise there, probably caused by periods of drought in the Sahel, but also for maize yields in Ghana and even bean yields in Tanzania. We've looked at groups of countries which have received assistance for their supply of seed at farmer level in comparison with countries which have never received that kind of assistance. And the data show again that the trend for yield for two important crops, maize and rice, is much more favorable in those countries which have received assistance to develop seed supply versus those countries which have never received such assistance. Of course, none of this would be possible without better varieties. And the number of breakthroughs which have been made in breeding crop varieties which are higher yielding and well adapted to African conditions is really quite a remarkable achievement of the past couple of decades. This work has been funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, USAID, and a number of other donors. And we're at the point now where for most of the food crops that the continent depends on, we can find an improved variety which is adapted or which has reasonable adaptation to most of the agroecologies. Of course, a lot of work still needs to be done, and that's why it's exciting to see ILCI come onto the scene with a focus on developing national breeding capacity at within the National Ag Research Institutes. Equally important, and some might say even more timely or important than the development of the new varieties, though, has been a model or a system for supplying seed at farmer level and achieving high rates of adoption of the new varieties. And a group of colleagues and myself have really kind of made a science out of the interventions that are required in order to achieve a sustainable supply of seed at farmer level. And I just like to describe some of the components of this model. Of course, we've already mentioned the importance of crop breeding. Here, the main innovation, I think, over the past couple of decades has been the involvement of farmers in identifying and selecting the best adapted varieties. Of course, those traits are combined with higher yield, stress tolerance, increased harvest index, and reduced time to maturity, which are selections made by the breeder. But at this point, I think we're at a stage where we have some level of predictability in releasing varieties which are well accepted by farmers. Another major breakthrough has been the emergence of private, independent African seed companies as producers and distributors of the seed of those new varieties. And it's been exciting to work with about 120 of those across 15 countries. And most exciting of all, perhaps, has been to see that women entrepreneurs have been quite effective in this field. And we now, in fact, count about 26 CEOs of independent seed companies across 15 countries in Africa. Of course, if farmers are unaware of the value of the new varieties, they're unlikely to go buy the seed. And so it's likewise been exciting to see the emergence of a more effective model for farmer awareness building through village-based advisors, which can be recruited at a ratio of about 1 to 100 farmers, and which can be effective at distribution of small sample packs, information, seedlings, and other technologies, so that farmers can test out a new variety or another technology on a small scale on their own farm. And then if they see good results, are able to come back, go to an agro dealer, and be able to purchase larger quantities of the seed. Agro dealers, which operate at village level, are likewise a very key component to the development of a viable seed system. And these really are the people who are guaranteeing access to seed on a season in and season out basis among smallholder farmers. They often also serve as a point of advisory service for smallholder farmers who may not see any other extension agent over the course of a year. And so we have a model. What's key, I think, to its proper implementation is that all of the components that I've described really need to be implemented at a certain level at the same time, so that each group of actors along the seed value chain has an incentive to deliver their outputs. And where we end up is a viable seed system that can continue to grow on its own, which is really the definition of sustainability. And we've identified that tipping point to be around the level where farmers are getting about 3 metric tons per hectare for their cereal crops, or where farmers have, about 30% of farmers have adopted improved varieties. And at this point, we really feel like there's a viable seed system in place. So that's all really good news. And the fact that this work has been implemented in about 15 countries of Africa is really exciting. Unfortunately, there are still approximately 38 million farm families in Africa who still don't have access to improved seed. They are within a total population of about 320 million people across 15 countries, where the absolute rate of poverty is above 50%, and the average rate of child malnutrition is sadly hovering around 38%. And so Seed Systems Group, working with Cornell University, has developed a comprehensive 5-year plan for the development of seed systems in these left behind regions. And we're eager to work with ILCI and other crop breeding initiatives in taking up new varieties, promoting them among farmers, getting production going, and getting supply going at farmer level. In closing, I'd just like to say that we at Seed Systems Group are excited about the work of ILCI in Africa and in Latin America and wherever the initiative will intervene. And we wish lots of success to the national crop breeding teams, and we're eager to collaborate with you in any way that's possible. Thank you very much for your time.
So thank you to all the speakers. That was a really enlightening presentation. So thanks very much to everybody on that. Now we have approximately 15 minutes for questions and feedback from the group. So let's open it up. So Joe, and the USAID team, can you make your images appear? And people can ask questions directly to you, and let's go from that. So I guess I'll start with one. This goes to Joe Cornelius. Joe, in 2021, you've been launching off. What are your goals and milestones for 2021? And then also, what's the structure of Gates Ag 1? What's the team look like?
So first of all, thank you, Steve, for the invitation to be here today. And and speak with the group. So the goals for 2021, in many ways, actually are parallel to ILCI. GATEAG1, as everyone knows, is a new organization. We've just assembled our leadership team, and 2021 actually will be our scale-up year. And that will be the year that the leadership team will be working with a number of public and private sector parties in developing our business plan going forward and starting to develop specific programs that we want to implement going forward. The organizational structure of GATEAG1 is also going to evolve as we go through that process. The primary intersection with GATEAG1 will be with the existing ag development organization within the foundation. That remains unchanged as it always has. And GATEAG1 will be adding a new functionality to the foundation. So from an organizational perspective, GATEAG1 is a separate standalone entity that will work with ag development within the foundation, and it will also work with other public-private sector partners in the ag sector space.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So a question that's coming up on chat is to Joe Devries from Gael, are you limited to working in Africa? What you outlined, Joe, in Africa is similar to a situation in Haiti. And
Yeah, no, we're not limited to working in Africa, and I guess that's why we didn't call it Seed Systems Group for Africa or something like that. But we're aware that there are many parts of the world, many countries in the world where farmers still lack access to high quality seed. And so we're eager to work even with the groups in Haiti and Costa Rica and Asia if possible. I think, this presentation was not really about where the work's done. It's really more about, the model, which has kind of surprisingly proved to be robust and dependable in a wide range of countries, and with a number of different cropping systems. So we feel confident elements of it can be applied really in just about every country.
okay, thanks, Joe. So I have a question for Meredith, Jessica, and Jane. Many of our centers of innovation work in countries where USAID Feed the Future has or had very active presence. How can they connect with the networks that you've established in those countries?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I think you're really kind of getting directly to the work of the Innovation Lab Community of Practice, which is also sharing the information being collected with the missions, because it's, the kind of that necessity to connect the innovation labs and seeing what they're doing as a whole, not only each individually, then with the missions. So I don't know if Jessica, if you'd like to say anything else on that, or Jane.
Thanks, Meredith. I don't have anything else to add, but just to reinforce the point or the comment in your response, that I think the benefit of the community of practice on cross-cutting themes is really to be able to work at more of a network or collective level with the missions and our host country partners and organizations, so that we're collaborating and leveraging the work of one another, as opposed to sometimes perhaps repeating and duplicating those efforts, which we have seen particularly in the cross-cutting themes like gender and capacity development. So if you are able to take the survey and provide your input into that community of practice, and or would like to reach out to me or Kat at the Global Knowledge Initiative, which is providing facilitated and administrative support for the community, we'd be happy to have you along in that journey.
Okay, thank you. So Joe Devries is like a popular guy.
Yeah.
Pick a question, Joe, in the chat box and go for it. Just
Yeah,
one
I
no.
think probably one of the most provocative questions there is what about seed quality, and how do you ensure quality? And I think, what we're basically trying to do is ensure that whatever seed system or seed supply level that we're able to get to is demand driven. And so, the people who are producing the seed and the people who are selling the seed have an incentive to ensure the quality is there. Now, we know from experience as well that once private sector gets up and going, in a lot of situations, it almost immediately shoots itself in the foot and starts to put out less than optimal quality of seed just in order to grab the market. And so, we do realize that public quality assurance systems are very key. And so we've been meeting with the quality assurance teams in all the countries and regions where we want to work, but we have not come in saying, let's start with ensuring quality, because that can often constrain the early stages when what you really want to do is get people excited about producing seed and getting more farmers access to the improved varieties. So I would say that's the priority that emerges kind of in the next wave of development of the seed system. And what we're shooting for is a good balance between supply and quality control, but the kind of quality control that doesn't squelch supply and prevent these early stage seed producers from gaining a foothold in the market. I guess the other one is, key to everything here is a good, healthy collaboration between public and private sector. And that seems to have been where the magic lies. We're excited to see all this brilliant people involved with the development of new varieties, and we're not going to get more into breeding than we need to be. But at the same time, there's quite a bit of concern over whether these new varieties are actually reaching farmers at the scale that they were intended to. And so we're saying, why don't we just focus on developing the seed supply systems for these publicly bred materials, but bring in a strong private sector element.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I want to go to Holly's question. I sort of like it because I think it reflects how we're trying to build the ILCI. So it's a joint question to both Joe and Meredith. Joe, how are you ensuring women and youth are equitably participating in the enterprises you are supporting under a Seed Systems Group? And then Meredith, what are the key interventions to ensure this? So Joe and then Meredith, please.
Yeah, it started out as a requirement, meeting the enlightened metrics of the funding came from Gates Foundation and was a strong principle of Melinda herself. But I'm happy to say, with time, it became a much easier task as we realized that women have a lot of aptitude in the area of crop breeding, first of all, and also seed supply. And so we go in really looking and assuming that there are women in this field who want to develop their enterprises, and we'll go first to those women. And almost invariably, we find they're the most dynamic, they're the most switched on, and they're the best, have the best and most recent information coming from farmers. The youth, it's rare to find someone who really has the experience needed and the diligence to cash flow a seed company at the age of 20 or 25. I'll be honest with you. Although we have seen people in their 30s who are capable of doing it. But where the youth can really get a foothold, I think, is in agro dealership and also village-based advisors. And we're eager to always push the VBAs, the village-based advisors, toward the youngest members of the village who are interested in agriculture, and also recruit as many young owners of agro dealerships as possible.
Meredith?
Yeah, thank you. I think Joe really addressed well some of the aspects around gender, and also you've got fabulous people on your team who are assisting on this with great and with cultural practice. And really it gets down to, in each local context, ensuring that you are reaching out broadly to everyone who potentially has interest in this, including women and youth. Jane Lewicky-Zuka is here, and she's recently done some studies on youth and engaging them in these areas. So I'd also like to call on her to say a few things.
Thank you very much, Meredith and others. Yes, I'm really interested to hear what you're working on. It's all very exciting, and I am seeing parallels in a number of studies we've done over the past year. One focused on the inclusion of women and youth in market systems development approaches in agriculture, and another looking at private sector driven or dominated pluralistic approaches to extension and advisory services. And it's not surprising to me to hear that you do see these roles as village-based advisors. And I'm wondering too, whether or not the young people are actually owning the seed dealerships. Those who are interested in farming often have limited land opportunities, not everywhere. Sometimes they do have quite a lot of access to land. What kinds of ways are you experiencing or working on to create incentives to work within the family businesses, but also to help young people in their groups or increasingly as parts of associations to be able to be the customers and gain access? I have seen in my experience in doing, with development organizations playing an incentive role for limited periods of time, great success in uptake. But I'm also wondering if it really is crop and market specific, the margins that young people can get, and whether you do see some preferences emerging among young people, both males and females, as customers. So those are a few comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I've got some good news and bad news for this group. So the group of speakers, the good news is you've done one fantastic job to engage people for questions. The bad news is we'd like you to go to the chat section and make sure that you answer the questions that weren't covered in the presentation. So one last question for the group, and this comes from Miguel Gomez to all presenters. And you all have basically about 2 minutes to do this. When studying constraints to adoption of improved varieties, it seems that we tend to overemphasize demand side factors. We rarely consider supply side constraints of producing improved varieties. Why is this the case? So we could start with Joe Devries, then Meredith, then Joe Cornelius. So Joe Devries, first shot.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think, if you want to go to scale, you've got to work with people who are incentivized to do that. And we've seen how far public seed agencies can take us, and it's not near far enough. We've also seen NGOs become involved, but we don't want ad hoc involvement in something so critical as the supply of seed. What we're trying to do is establish regular, dependable supply of seed on an ongoing basis, and that grows and that improves over time, even without development agencies' interference or interventions. So, you've really got to bring in a private sector model at that stage. And luckily, we found that there are a lot of really smart, switched on agripreneurs. I saw the reference that Meredith put up there in Africa who are eager to get launched into this kind of a business. So I think, if we can just overcome sometimes, that reluctance of working with private sector people who need to make a profit, and just give them the basic tools, training at a sophisticated level of training so that they're able to produce hybrid seed, and then access to cheap, reliable seed processing equipment, they can figure out the rest and build a solid seed enterprise.
Okay. I want to give Meredith and Joe 1 brief minute for closure. So Meredith, is there anything you'd like to close with? or
Yeah,
Joe?
I will just say, these are like really age-old questions that we've been working on for decades, and hopefully we're making some progress. But we really, as we work on these seeds, we need to ensure that they are responding to the needs to be profitable, to be low risk, and also to be low labor, especially for women. We can't be putting out seeds or production systems that require people to spend even more time in the field. I'll also note something that hasn't come up here, just because I'm an economist, is there's also the policy system. And we know that in many cases, there's national policy that's sometimes inhibiting these things. And your lab's not working on this, but other labs are. And so, just kind of that holistic ecosystem for that. Sorry I took so much time. Over to you, Joe.
Good, thank you. And Joe, final word.
Final word, it's always a bad idea to follow an ag economist when actually answering an economic question. But I would push back and actually say that supply side, demand side are not mutually exclusive. And we, collectively need to actually address both equally. If we don't, technology will never be adapted. The benefits are not realized at both across the entire value chain. We will end up with basically orphan technologies in the process. So totally agree that the demand side and the supply side economics have to work for all the key constituents. And I think all of us on the call are absolutely committed to that.
Great, thank you very much. Committee or panel, thank you very much. Great session. And I'm over with the timing. So Sarah, I apologize. And back to you.
That's okay, Steve. At this point, we will take a break, and please be back by 9:20. Thank you all for joining. See you soon.